Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Euro JDM Garage. About 6 or 7 years ago, I stumbled upon some online articles talking about the AMGs that were not built as Mercedes-Benz. These overlooked AMGs became something of an obsession for me, trying to locate and find them and import them from Japan. And after many years of searching, I can proudly say that I now own both Mitsubishi AMG cars. So in today's episode, we'll be comparing the two different Mitsubishi AMGs. I'll do a full review of the Debonair AMG, like I did with the Galant AMG in a separate video, so stay tuned for that. But for this, I'm just going to talk about what the different approaches to these two vehicles were. Now back in the 1980s, late 80s, Japan's bubble economy era, their country was just going crazy, cash rich, they were spending money on all sorts of things. And they got into a lot of partnerships with different European car tuners and manufacturers, and they partnered with the Japanese brands. So the first vehicle that Mitsubishi teamed up with AMG was for this Debonair. The Debonair is the full luxury vehicle for Mitsubishi. This was new compared to the previous 4 generations, which was just the original Debonair. This is the Debonair 5, and it's the Royal. So long wheelbase and everything. And then a few years later, in 1990-91, they produced the Galant AMG. And the different approaches were the Debonair was a full luxury vehicle, while the Galant was a much more sportier vehicle. And the Galant AMG really went full on tuning the car with its engine, its drivetrain components. But visually, it looks more or less like a Galant, maybe a VR4. While the Debonair externally looks crazy, it's full body package by AMG, but internally they didn't really change any of the engine components. So stick around and let's take a deeper look at both. Now looking at both cars side by side, it's easy to see what a difference they are. On the surface, they might both be 4-door front-wheel drive sedans, but their design, their approach is completely different. Versus the Debonair, which is a luxury car, very much longer, taller, wider than the lower, shorter, and narrower Galant. The driving dynamics are extremely different too. I really wish that the Debonair would have been a full rear-wheel drive, full-size sedan, and it suffers for that. And the reason that Mitsubishi made it a front-wheel drive car had a number of factors. First of all, interior space. It created a much larger cabin by having the driven wheels on the front. Also, production. The cost would have been much more expensive to create a new rear-wheel drive sedan, and they based it off existing kind of front-wheel drive architecture. And with the Galant, the front-wheel drive I don't think hampers it as much because it's a much lighter vehicle and it's very sporty. So it doesn't really need that rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, although of course everyone knows the VR4, as I spoke about in my previous video, creates a better driving dynamic. But let's take a look inside and we'll see the real difference between the two. Now interior wise, I think we can see the biggest difference between the Debonair and the Galant. I mean, the Galant's not trying to be a full luxury vehicle, but this is, and this is competing with, again, the Nissan President, Toyota Century, the full ultra luxury Japanese vehicles of its era. And I think this is doing it best. I mean, this is the reason why I don't mind the slightly weak engine and its front wheel drive, though of course if it is rear wheel drive it would have been much better. It's because this interior is so nice. This kind of caramel colored interior contrasts so nice with that white, and it's in amazing shape, and it's so plush and thick and such good quality leather and wood throughout. I mean, this is rivaling the best of what Mercedes and BMW are making at this era. And don't think that this is just AMG touch, because from what I've read, the only thing that AMG really did interior-wise was put their steering wheel on. Everything else is coming from the Debonair Royal. Of course, the Royal is a top-of-the-line model in the Debonair line, which the Debonair is the flagship model for Mitsubishi of this era. And you're looking at this interior and you're saying to yourself, what happened to Mitsubishi? Nothing comes close to this. And it's really a product of being in that bubble economy in that late 80s era where money was flowing and they did not spare any expense in building some of the best interiors in the world. So inside the Galant AMG, it's definitely a lot more Spartan than the Debonair AMG, but believe it or not, there's actually a few more AMG touches in here than the Debonair. First of all, we also get an AMG steering wheel, like we did on the Debonair, but we get a wood shift knob and wood trim on the doors, on all the doors, and this is real wood. It adds a lot to the interior, I think, and unlike a lot of Japanese cars of there, it may be fake wood. This is real, you know, a Falterbach put in wood in AMG, and it looks great. And these seats, while not leather and not so plush, they are very supportive, harder seats, but it's more in line with what you're driving. With the Debonair, you're driving a very kind of soft vehicle. Here it's much harder, much more sports oriented. And that's why I love both of them for different reasons. I'd rather be in the Debonair as an interior overall, but driving wise, the Galant just has the top. It's so lightweight, has plenty of power, and of course with the manual transmission, it makes it a great driver-oriented car. That being said, I'm in the notion that there's room for all different kinds of cars in this world, and it just depends on what your mood is. Would you rather have a kind of laid-back driving experience, or would you rather be more engaged with the car? So it really depends on that, and I think the overall quality here is really tops. It's, you know, not quite as Debonair quality, but still, I mean, this car is almost 30 years old and everything still looks pretty much brand new. The condition is great, and that's a testament to the quality of components that Mitsubishi put during this era. Now looking at the Debonair from the side, we can really see the touches that AMG did to it. First of all, they proudly display their lettering on the side over here. On each side they did it, and overall the whole body, from the rear bumper, side skirts, front bumper, and this whole kind of thicker, more bulky doors and body style was done specifically for the Debonair AMG. And the thing that sticks out the most, and we actually have a little bit of a fender flare that's also done on the AMG model, but the thing that sticks out the most is probably these wheels. These AMG wheels were made specifically for the Debonair, and they are in matching white color to match with the body color. And what's interesting is that AMG used this same wheel design on the Type 1 Galant. You know, the Type 2 used a different wheel design, but they recycled it. So I thought it was a little bit interesting. And overall, this thing is just screaming 80s touches. Also, this car is riding on full air suspension, so you can kind of hear it, and when you park it, it goes a little bit lower, and it makes it just such a smooth riding vehicle. Now, in comparison with the Debonair AMG, the Galant goes for a much more subtle look, with the wheels also standing out, matching the body color, of course. But overall, it's much more subdued. For example, the AMG lettering on the Debonair, it's huge and loud. Here, it says Tuned by AMG, very small, only noticeable by those looking up close. The body too, while it does have an AMG body kit, it's a lot more subtle, and everything from the wing to the bumpers, side skirts are more in tune with what you get on a normal kind of GTI version of the Galant. But so taking a look at the two cars, I think it gives a very good example of where Mitsubishi and AMG were at during this era. Now, starting off with the Debonair here, it says on the back here Debonair 5. Now, the 5 actually fell off while I was washing it, but the reason it says 5 is because the previous generation, this is the second generation, but the previous generation went through 4 kind of minor revisions during its production cycle, which lasted from 1964 until 1986. And that's typical of the long production cycles of the Japanese ultra-luxury vehicles, such as the Nissan President, Toyota Century. They go many, many years without having any significant change. Now, the Galant, on the other hand, was also introduced about the same time, in 1987. This is the 6th generation of the Galant, and it was built until around 1993. So again, these cars occupy the same time frame. The difference being, of course, it's a much more exclusive vehicle, and the Galant's a much more mainstream vehicle. And on the back here, we can see similar touches, such as the old MMC Mitsubishi Motor Company on both cars. We can see the Tuned by AMG badge over here, but look how much smaller it is on the Galant compared to this pretty loud, ingrained AMG logo on the rear here, in the rear trunk. So both cars share a lot of similarities from that era, but the dimensions, everything about them is very different. Let's take a look under the hood. So looking under the hood of both vehicles, very, very different power plants. On the left, we have the famous, revered Mitsubishi straight 4 engine, the 4G63, which went on to have many revisions, powering the VR4, powering with the Lancer Evos, of course turbocharged, and other revisions over the years, versus the 6G72 engine, the V6 over here, or as Mitsubishi called it, Cyclone, which has a slightly worse reputation. I mean, it's not as famous. It was produced under license by Chrysler for a lot of their vehicles during this era, the Dodges and Chryslers of that time, although the Mitsubishi engines got a lot of revisions as well, and then it became a much more potent motor, producing a lot more horsepower from this original iteration. But speaking of this iteration, this is really the production of the Cyclone. I think it came out alongside the Debonair and a few other vehicles, but this one is only a single overhead cam engine, and it's producing just 148 horsepower and 170 foot-pounds of torque. And when you consider that the vehicle is weighing about 3,600 pounds, 3,570 pounds on the V6 Royal Edition, that's not so much power for such a big vehicle. Versus the Galant over here, which has this great dual overhead cam 4G63 that AMG went on to tune themselves, reinforced internals, a lot of stuff internally just much stronger than the base kind of GTI 16 valve engine. And it's producing 170 horsepower and about 140 foot-pounds of torque, although that might be underrated. So the AMG here is producing about 20 more horsepower, and it's slightly less torque, 9 foot-pounds less of torque, but again, that's negligible. And the main difference is the Galant's weighing in at only, look at this, 2,690 pounds. So let's round it out, 2,700 pounds curb weight on the Galant, while 3,600 pounds on the AMG Debonair. So you're talking about a 900-pound difference. So that's making all the difference in terms of driving dynamics. But I'll say the truth, I think these Cyclone engines aren't that bad. They're pretty reliable overall. I know some people have different experiences, but they've been still in production until today. Today they're still being put in a lot of the Mitsubishi Pajeros, and that's a testament for an engine. When it's being produced continuously for over 30 years, that's very impressive in my book. So that was a different approach. Straight 4 here, single overhead cam V6. Well, there you have it, guys. Two of the rarest JDM cars of their era in the 80s and 90s. I believe the production on the Debonair is about 400, about 500 on the Galant. So these are really, really rare cars, and I feel like I'm sort of a custodian of them, keeping them in good shape until whenever the next owner takes care. But you know, I'm trying to hold on to them as long as I can. And they really should be in a museum, I feel. These are very interesting parts of automotive history that a lot of people don't even know about. The partnership between AMG and a Japanese brand like Mitsubishi, that's the last time that happened after these cars went out of production. And it's a shame, you know, it's really interesting. You don't have those kind of collaborations. Yeah, you have, you know, BMW and Toyota making the Supra, but I don't think it's quite the same. This era of Japan and their cars is really something else, and I'm proud and I'm glad that I own both. And I don't mean to brag, but I believe I'm probably the only person on earth that owns both of these cars at the same time. I mean, seeing them both side by side is a dream that, you know, thanks to God I was able to realize, and it's really amazing to see them both standing right here on American shores. So tune in next week where we'll do a full review of the Debonair, and I'll show all the crazy features this car has, like I did with the Galant review from a couple months back. Anyways guys, thanks for watching. If you like the video, subscribe, leave a comment, let me know what you think about these AMG Mitsubishis, and remember, life is too short to drive something boring, so enjoy what you drive. Take care guys.